Welcome to episode 12 of the 2023 It's in the Ballot Roadshow. Today we're coming from you live from Whanganui Electorate in the Stella Bar in Whanganui. We have an almost full array of candidates who are vying to be your next local MP. The only thing in the way is your vote. I'd like to introduce our host, Kathryn Booth, who's going to be the local host, who's going to be taking our questions out of the boxes. The first thing on the agenda, we have the opening statements of the candidates. Each candidate has 1 minute to introduce themselves and tell us what they're all about. And we will start off with Marion Sanson for the Greens.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody. I'm standing for and asking for your party vote for the Green Party this afternoon. Thanks.
Short and sweet. All right, we move now to Steph Lewis for Labour.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Steph Lewis and I have been your local Member of Parliament for the last 3 years. It's been an absolute privilege and I'm really proud of what I've achieved in my first term, including securing funding for the port, getting the rollout of 5G across State Highway 3 to fix those black spots, getting the flight school up and running again after COVID and assisting with getting international students back in, and advocating for cost of living support measures to help families make ends meet. Under Labour, we've lifted 77,000 kids out of poverty, introduced the winter energy payment, free prescriptions, lunches in schools. We've built 13,000 public houses and passed the Zero Carbon Act. There's a lot at stake this election and we've been through a tough few years, but we're coming out the other side of that now and we've turned a corner. This election, we need an inclusive government focused on the bread and butter issues. That's why I'm asking for you to mix this for Labour and Greens.
Thank you, Steph. Now we have the national candidate, Carl Bates, and I'd like to say thank you for being the first national candidate who's been able to join us on our roadshow today.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you so much for the opportunity. My name's Carl Bates and I'm looking to be your local Member of Parliament for Whanganui this year to ensure Whanganui has an active, visible and engaged local Member of Parliament, someone who is fighting for the issues that matter to you and to our communities. This year is a critical year for New Zealand and it's really important that we elect a government that can get New Zealand back on track. A national-led government led by Christopher Luxon will fix our economy by ensuring we get inflation under control, lift incomes, restore law and order, and ensure that we all get the health and education services we deserve. So starting next week and going up to the 14th of October, I'm asking you to party vote national and vote Carl Bates for Whanganui.
Thank you. And now, Bill First for NZ First.
Good afternoon. I'm Bill Arnold, standing for New Zealand First. I'm standing because this is the most crucial election the people of New Zealand will face in our lifetimes. We're facing or have faced 3 very tumultuous years, and starting with the advent of COVID pandemic, the closing of our borders and curtailing of our freedoms. While initially necessary, this went on to the point of being a danger to our democracy and created massive financial chaos. Without having a clear mandate to do so, the government has instituted such changes as co-governance, 3 waters, and changes to school curriculums to include subjects such as sex and gender identity without prior consultation with parents. Both major parties have not properly managed the economy to grow wealth or future-proof the country.
Thank you. And finally, from the Animal Justice Party, we have Sandra Kiley.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Sandra Kyle, and I'm standing for the newly formed Animal Justice Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Our aim is to be a political voice for the animals.
Fantastic. All right. And now we have some questions that we think that you'll be asking after tonight's show. Is it time for employers who steal from employees' pay packets to be punished in the same way as employees who commit theft under the Theft as a Service? Will the promise of making fruit and vegetables GST free with the simplest method, will the simplest method of administration be ruled out because voters see it as too complex, just like filing an IR3? And what parties are promising to load up job seekers with so much temporary additional support payment by reducing the base benefit rates that it will actively discourage them from taking a part-time job? Well, now it's time to go ahead and have a look at this wonderful electorate that we're in at the Whanganui district. We do not have an electorate video. Once more, we are doing it freehand. So as you can see, we have the Whanganui Electorate here, which starts off at the south of Whanganui and continues all the way up the coast with Waverley, Patea, Hawera, Normanby, Manaia, and heading up State Highway 3 all the way to Stratford and slightly beyond. It straddles both the Manawatu and Taranaki regions. It has both the Whanganui River and Whanganui National Park in it. It has the highest share of people working in manufacturing in the country, and it shares 1/3 of Mount Taranaki with the New Plymouth and Taranaki King Country electorates. And I think, as Sam was saying, there's also a large milk factory at Hawera. So now we're going to move on to our 28 questions and boxes. We have a selection of questions that the candidates have been given in advance. They will have 1 minute to answer. They have the option to use butt-in or defer cards if they feel like another candidate would be best suited to answer, or if after someone's response they have their own 2 cents to add. Some of the questions are thought-provoking. Some of them are loaded. All of them are viewer-submitted. So let's see what happens. I'll hand it over to you, Kathy.
Right. Now, I'm sorry, I don't know any of you, so we're just going to start at that end with our lovely lady from the Green Party. And I'm going to ask you, what number would you like? You have 1 to 25. No, just stay there, honey, and give me a number.
I'd like number 9, please.
Number 9? First one we can see. Now, each one of these has a letter. This is L for Lima. That letter just enables us to bring this up. Your question is, if you had been an elected MP at the time of the protest at Parliament regarding the mandates, would you have gone onto the grounds of Parliament to listen and acknowledge the concerns of the people?
I'm going to defer that one. Thank you. I'll use my defer card, which I missed late at the moment.
And who would you like to defer it
Who
to?
would you like to defer it to?
Carl Bates, please.
I was pretty sure that was going to happen, Marion, but that's okay. The Greens won't answer it, but I'll give you a straight answer, or you might call it a straight answer. It's a hypothetical. I wasn't a member of Parliament at the time. I wasn't in Parliament, so I can't answer a hypothetical. I'm not going to answer a hypothetical because it's something that happened in the past.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And next,
Can I have number 25, please?
way over the side. $25 is X for X-ray. Okay. Health workers who work for Te Whatu Ora are still required to be vaccinated against COVID-19. If elected, will you change the law to remove this mandate?
So there are currently no mandates in place for workers. Te Whatu Ora has, as any employer can do under the Workplace Health and Safety Act, can implement requirements for staff. I read up last night that their policy on COVID vaccination is that for frontline clinical health workers, they strongly encourage or recommend they be vaccinated for COVID-19. For those in administrative roles, again, it's a recommend but not a requirement. For those in clinical roles, there is a pathway for consideration for not having a vaccination for COVID-19.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
next we'll have Carl.
5, Rima.
Rima. M. Oh, yeah, phonetic alphabet for M. M for Madagascar, because somewhere I'd love to go. What is your party's stance on central bank digital currency, and will your party support removing cash from being used in New Zealand?
Currently, we don't have a position on this question. I think what's most important to Kiwis right now is that we get inflation under control so that the money that they have is able to be used on the things that they need. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis created by this government's significant overspending over the last few years. And I think that Kiwis are asking right now how we're going to get that under control for them, how we're going to get inflation under control, rather than the currency or the type of currency that's going to be used. And so National's focused on getting inflation under control, getting the economy in order so that we can get that cost of living sorted for New Zealanders.
And Bill.
Number 13.
Prematoru. This is E for Echo. Our question is, will your party review the relationships and sexuality education, the REC, in primary schools?
Yes, our party believes that the government has no place in the bedrooms of people, and that sex education and gender identity education has no place in school without the prior consultation with the parents of the children. Thank you.
Thank you.
And lastly, Sandra. Oh, we have a button from Steph.
I'm going to butt in on that one because the government hasn't actually changed our health curriculum. So our health curriculum continues to be focused on healthy relationships, on consent, on knowing and understanding your own body, and educating people around their rights and contraception. There is unfortunately a campaign at the moment which is spreading false information about that there's been changes made in sex education when that's just not true.
Okay. Thank you.
And lastly, Sandra.
Could I have number 8, please?
Certainly. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. The letter is U. U for umbrella. The alphabet letter is U for umbrella. Okay. Right. It's okay. Long-term change requires strong and binding cross-party collaboration and agreement. A recent example would be the Mental Health and Addictions Working Group, which did not have decision-making powers. What is one area that your party could commit to attempting genuine, lasting and binding cross-party work for the long-term benefit of Aotearoa, New Zealand?
Based on our charter and values, we would commit to working on animal-related policies through cross-party cooperation. The well-being of animals is the primary reason we exist, but our underlying values of compassion, non-violence, and equality will be instrumental in creating genuine, lasting, and binding action for the long-term benefit of all the denizens of Aotearoa, New Zealand, human and animal.
Thank you.
Right. I think we'll go back to Marion. And would you like to pick a number?
Thank you.
Number
10, please. Number 10, please.
10 is Q for Quebec. Does your party believe that there should be a policy on the location of alternative energy sources, such as solar farms near urban areas?
Yeah, largely this should be dealt with under district plans, but it does make sense because there's energy lost in transmission. So, and solar has a lot of potential to meet our energy needs, and solar on rooftops where this works. The government is putting a lot of solar panels on public and state houses. That's very positive. And so we would like to see a lot more extension of solar energy generation, which can be done very locally.
Thank you, Marion.
Thank you.
I'll hand over to Steph.
Can I have number 22, please?
Certainly. '22 is S for Sierra. Would you or your party consider giving a fixed percentage of GST tax revenue to help fund local councils on infrastructure projects?
We already have the Regional Economic Partnerships Fund, which is a fund that we use to support local district councils and regional councils when they come to the government and they say, look, this is an economic priority for us. We'd like to invest in this. Quite often we see it in infrastructure projects like the port redevelopment. So we are already partnering with local councils and communities to put funding into economic projects that are important to that community.
Thank you.
And Carl.
26.
O for Omega. In the 2019 budget, $1.9 billion was allocated to improving mental health services. Excuse me. To what extent do you consider that this has improved our mental health system and made a difference to our country's well-being?
Thanks very much. It's a great question, but unfortunately, the $1.9 billion committed by the Labor government wasn't spent. And so it hasn't improved mental health and it hasn't improved the well-being of our country. It was another one of Labor's announceables that hasn't resulted in outcome for New Zealanders. National's committed to having the first Minister for mental health awareness and suicide prevention, should we have the privilege of forming the government on the 14th of October. And with that, a focus on supporting local organisations, co-funding local organisations who have experience and have delivered in mental health in communities across New Zealand to further improve the amount of work that they can do throughout our communities, as I say, across the country. And I'm looking forward to Matt Ducey fulfilling that role as that First Minister and us delivering for mental health across the country, because it's such a key issue right now. What some?
Thank you.
All right. And Bill.
Question number 6. Thanks.
6 is B for Bravo. Over the past few years, New Zealand has suffered from many forms of division. How would your party reconnect people and heal the divide so we are a united country once again?
One of the main things that it has caused division in this country, mostly through with ordinary people in the streets, has been co-governance. We believe in one flag, one nation, one people, equal vote for everybody of equal value, and one law for everybody, regardless of race or creed. Thank you.
We have some contribution from the Green Party candidate.
We have a button. Thank you.
Thank you. Unity can be illusory, as Captain William Hobson said, e iwi tātou. But we know that actually that was very symbolic, and there was a huge non-meeting of minds between the colonial government, the government in Great Britain, and the iwi at the time of the signing of Te Tiriti. We think that unity and shared values and understanding is what we need to work towards, and we'll only do that through having good process. We need to unite under Te Tiriti o Waitangi. It's brought us all together. I mean, these days we often do see in sport, at the beginning of COVID, our team of 5 million, and those awful attacks in the Christchurch mosques did bring our people together. But ideally, co-governance could bring us together, brings those two strands of ways of doing things together. They're good examples. And hopefully in the current crises we're under, we will.
Thank you. And finally, Sandra.
Could I have question number 3, please?
Number 3 is N for November. N for November. What is your party's commitment to conservation for the next term?
Our commitment could include protecting ecosystems, conserving biodiversity, promoting sustainable practices and policies. We would support scientific research on ethical and non-violent approaches to conservation, including the problem of introduced species. Our conservation efforts will be framed to benefit animals and promote compassion in society. Our specific policies would be detailed in official party documents.
Well, we've been seeing some good lining up with questions and people's interests. It's almost like we planned it or something, but as you can see, it's all random. So, yeah. Let's upend the order a little bit and go with. Let's have Sandra have another go, and we'll head back this way this time.
Turning you around, Sandra. Have another one. We're changing direction, so pick again.
Could I have 25?
Sure. Sorry, 25 has gone.
What about 27?
Yes. "27 is P for Peter. P for political party policies. What is your party's policy to get families out of emergency accommodation and into long-term stable housing?
We have no specific policies regarding housing and emergency accommodation. Our charter and values suggest that we would support policies aimed at providing stable housing solutions. We do have policies that will make it easier for tenants in rental accommodation to be with their pets, for example, because they are loved family members, and this is important. As usual, it is the poorer in our society who have the least power, the least resources, and who suffer the most. We would be looking after their interests primarily.
Thank you.
Good answer. Oh, well, and Bill.
Number 7, thanks.
Number 7 is I for Indigo. Is government spending on cycling and cycleways a waste of money? Please explain your reasoning.
Government spending on cycling and cycleways is not a waste of money. These are necessary for people's access to exercise. It's a great way to travel the country and see the country. However, right at the moment, in these trying times economically, we should proceed fairly cautiously with funding cycleways and cycling, and it should only be as the country can afford it. Thank you.
And we have a button from National.
Thanks very much. I think it's one of those questions, like many things when it comes to funding, it depends on the dollar value and it depends on the effectiveness of spending. And we've got a government at the moment that just doesn't know how to spend money and get an effective outcome. When you spend $51 million on a cycleway across the Auckland Harbour that isn't even going to be built, that's not a good spend of money. My wife and I and our 2 boys are often seen on our bikes on the cycleways around Whanganui because we enjoy them and we love them as for recreational use. We don't use them to get to and from work. But that said, you know, there are many New Zealanders across the country that enjoy and use cycleways. But it's about spending money within an appropriate context and getting an outcome, which this government continues to prove it just cannot deliver.
Thank you.
And Carl, it's your turn to pick a number as well.
Can I have number 4, please? That's what I saw still
4
there.
is still here.
Yep.
Still got plenty in the 20 range, folks. So I'll slide them down so you can see them soon. Y for Yellow. Even though our state highways are managed by Waka Kotahi, New Zealand Transport Agency, should district councils and residents have the final say on the speed limits that they have imposed?
As we saw yesterday, National has committed to accelerate New Zealand and increase the speed limits that Labor's unilaterally taken down across the country to 80 and take those back to 100, because local residents and local communities have said across the country that they've been slowed down unnecessarily in places that don't need to have those speeds. Yes, there are always appropriate contexts for some areas to have lower speeds, and community consultation and engagement is important as part of that. But these unilateral, let's just blanket across the country because we've got an ideology that we don't like cars, the current government's ideology, of course, that's just not the way to do these things. And so National, as you would have seen yesterday, has committed to return those speed limits to 100 and accelerate New Zealand so we can get this country moving and get it back on track.
And Steph, it's yours.
Do we still have number 19?
We do. Number 19 is J for jelly. The question is, the Future for Local Government report says the current local government funding and finance system is already under pressure and is not sustainable. How is your party going to respond to this issue?
We have long agreed that the funding model for local government is unsustainable. That's one of the reasons why we initiated the Future of Local Government review. That report has come back with some recommendations. We have said to, or our Minister for Local Government, Kieran McAnulty, has said to the local government sector, have a read of it, have a think about it, come back and let's have a conversation after the election. I know that one of the reasons as well that we proposed our water reforms is because of the debt on council's books, and that is one way that we can separate that liability from the council's balance sheet, giving local government more money, freeing up more money to be able to invest in the things that they want to invest in, which is why we've proposed that balance sheet separation, an alternative model to managing our water infrastructure.
And we have a button from National on this one.
The challenge in the Whanganui Electorate, specifically in Whanganui with that ideology, is that it's just not right. Taking away both the revenue and the asset off the council's balance sheet makes the council not able to fund its future projects because its balance sheet's a lot smaller than it otherwise would be. Secondly, the numbering or the forecasting for the impact of Three Waters here on the Whanganui District Council says that it could be up to 25% more expensive under Labour's 3 Waters, 10 Waters, whatever they're calling it these days, than if council continued to do the work that it's been doing and doing well. So under National, we will repeal 3 Waters and give the council the opportunity to continue to do the work that it's been doing and provide it effective funding models and financing models to provide for the additional capital works required in this city. We'll read the report, it's fact actually, but Labor doesn't like the facts.
And we'll move on to Marion.
Number 20, please.
20. Number 20 is Z for zebra, Zulu, I think, in the alphabet. What is your party's position on how local government rating reform should be delivered?
Sorry. This is
Some good cross-party collaboration here.
how local government rating reform should be delivered. I think consultation and cooperation is the main thing there. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll head back to Steph.
Could I have 24, please?
Sure. 24 is V for Victor. Does your party believe that we should protect spaces and services exclusively for biological women?
AJP does not explicitly address the issue of protecting spaces and services exclusively for biological women. We would possibly review research and interpret it from a lens of equality and compassion.
And we have a button from Bill.
Yeah, New Zealand First believes that we should protect the spaces and services for biological women in the with regards to public toilets. We believe that there should be separate spaces for women, men, and for transgender people. Thank you.
All right. And now, Bill, you get to pick a number.
Is that 22 there?
I've got 23, 21 and 28.
I'll be 21 again.
We can all wish. A for apple, alpha. Oh. There we go.
Oh, this is a good one.
Can you let me ask it? What will happen to the winter energy payment if your party is elected to govern?
Quite simply, the winter energy payment was a New Zealand First initiative when we went into coalition with Labor in 2017. It was one of our non-negotiables, and we would retain the winter energy payment if our party is elected. Thank you.
And we have a button.
And Steph.
That's the
Sandra,
question.
sorry.
Oh, sorry, it was A. A.
AJP, excuse me, AJP does not directly address the issue of the winter energy payment. We would refer to our values of equality and compassion when reviewing this. Speaking personally, as a senior on superannuation myself, I am often cold in the winter, even with the supplement, because I'm afraid of the cost of heating. Winter's a hard time for the more vulnerable sections of our society, in particular the elderly. Animals also suffer from the cold in winter. So many farmed animals are left out in the cold and rain without any shelter. Lack of shelter also means they have no shade in summer. I have many times been to local slaughterhouses and seen animals in pens without any shelter from the dry rain and wind. We have a policy on animal shelter.
With the, I'll ask another question on this, the winter energy payment. We currently have a grant scheme for insulating and providing sort of heat pumps for houses, but it requires people to be in the strange position where they have they own their own house, but they have insubstantial income and very low assets. Since this was Bill's question originally, would you consider expanding the eligibility of those home insulation and heat pump grants?
Sorry, in relation to, sorry?
Oh, the winter energy payment was a NZ First policy. Would you consider expanding other measures that would help make that payment go further?
Whilst we have no specific policy on that, we would, New Zealand First would at least retain those grants for insulation and heating.
Given we've gone off script,
Yep.
I'm just going to add as well that National would keep the winter energy payment should we have the privilege of becoming the government on the 14th of October. And the key here is enabling New Zealanders, senior citizens in this context, to make sure their dollars can go as far as they possibly can. And the only way we can do that is by getting inflation under control so that the cost of living is under control for all New Zealanders. And that's exactly what National is committed to doing.
All right, I think let's keep going. I think Marion.
Yeah, the Green Party too would like to chip in here a little bit, because it's one of our key policies is the clean energy payment. We would like to support people both with grants and loans so that both homeowners and landlords for their tenants can actually upgrade to zero carbon heating.
And Steph.
So the winter energy payment is actually a Labor policy and one that we brought in our first term. We have also brought in the Warmer Kiwi Homes, which I believe is the insulation and heating subsidy that you're referring to. And we, in the last budget back in May, actually increased the eligibility for that. So as more Kiwis can be eligible to insulate their home, put in fixed heating in their home. I know landlords use it to improve the quality of their housing for tenants. And we've also expanded it to include LED light bulb subsidies as well, just to help New Zealanders bring down that cost of paying for electricity in their homes and make it a bit easier to make ends meet.
Thank you very much. We'll get back on track.
That's exactly what we're going to do should we get the privilege of governing on the 14th of
But now
October.
we'll start with the
And so given we're talking about the 14th, I'll take number 14.
14. 14 is K for kilo. And the question, in your opinion, what do you think will be the main issue that will decide this election?
So I'm pretty sure that you've all got the gist by now that it's very clear that as we knock on doors around this electorate, what's coming up when I'm talking to Kiwis across the income range, across the age brackets, across the different roles that they have in work and in the community, is the cost of living. And National is determined to get the economy back on track by enabling Kiwis to afford what it is that they need on a daily basis. And we're going to do that by getting inflation under control and by ensuring that the jobs that people have are higher income jobs, by working on productivity and the things that enable us to support business and farmers and those that employ people, to employ Kiwis and improve the life and living standards we have here in this great country.
And we have a contribution from Steph.
I actually think the biggest issue from talking to voters this election is trust. And that is that Labor has demonstrated in our 6 years in government that we can be trusted to both manage through crises and manage the economy. And we can see that because we've got our economy 7.7% bigger than before COVID. Wages are growing faster than inflation. The Treasury has inflation coming down. Statistics New Zealand has inflation coming down. Our economy is growing to the point where even the Australians are starting to be envious of it. So there is a lot to be hopeful for. And one thing that I'm hearing out on the doorsteps is people are very concerned about trust, in particular that National can't even be honest and open up their books to say how they're going to fund their tax cuts for the wealthy and how they're going to pay for all of their promises. Their numbers do not add up and they're refusing to open their books.
Yeah, and the hole in GST, which Grant Robertson doesn't want to talk about. And of course, the fact that all of that is based on Grant Robertson actually spending within the limits he's defined.
So we have
Please don't respond to
one more card. Yeah.
We have a button here from
Steph. So, sorry.
AJP.
you.
So,
My guess is that it's the cost of living that's going to be the main issue that decides the election. But I'd just like to take a moment to express my wish that more voters prioritised a more compassionate, non-violent and sustainable world. I'd like to see climate change a priority, and more people being prepared to look at different economic models that are more appropriate to the problems we face in the 21st century, such as the circular economic model that we advocate in AJP. I would like to see more people recognising that everything is connected, that the rights and welfare of all beings, human and non-human, and the planet are interwoven. We need more radical solutions to help humans, animals, and the planet. One of these is a transition away from animal agriculture to plant-based farming.
now over to you, Steph.
All right. Can I take number 1, please, Tahi?
This is a C for Alpha Bravo Celtic. Charlie. And the Chocolate Factory. Do you believe that 16-year-olds have the maturity to vote?
We as society have said that they are mature enough to get behind the wheel of a car by themselves, that they're mature enough to be held criminally responsible for their actions, that they're mature enough to get married, get a tattoo. 16's the age of consent. They're mature enough to pay taxes. They're mature enough to decide to leave school. But apparently they're not mature enough to walk into a ballot and tick a box. So I think there are some real disparities there. And my personal view is that, yes, 16-year-olds should be allowed to vote.
Thank you.
And now Marion.
Number 15, please. Sure.
$15 is double A. Helps if I press it. In your opinion, what are the 3 most important issues that New Zealand is facing?
Our 3 crises. They are climate change, biodiversity and pollution. They're linked to each other, but we're focused on climate change because we really need to do something about this. Scientists have calculated that every 1 degree of warming we do adds up to 20% more rain in just 1 hour. And I think we're beginning to see that. And so it's going to make an impact on cost of living, on just about everything really. So let's address that for a start. Biodiversity, looking after our environment and other species, that also is very important. And pollution, really. This climate change, it is pollution that's going on. So let's look after the health of our environment and it will look after us.
Thank you. Good answer. I've been informed by our producer that, yes, we need to pick up the pace slightly, so I'll hand it to Sandra. Back to you. Yep.
Can I have 2, please?
Certainly. 2 is D for Delta. D for Delta. How are you going to address the cost of living crisis? And who would you like to defer it to?
We have a 10-point plan to address the cost of living crisis. We understand that families are doing tough at the moment. That's why we brought in free dental for under 30s. That's why we've made prescriptions free. We're going to bring in cheaper childcare, so we're extending that 20 hours free to under 2-year-olds, so as more families can afford early childhood education, meaning that they can get back into the workforce quicker. We are very focused on the cost of living, and that includes bringing down inflation. So Grant Robertson has been very careful to walk a fine line about how we're spending. The Prime Minister has asked ministers to reprioritise spending. So we found almost $8 billion worth of savings since the beginning of the year. So we are making sure that where we're spending, we're doing so in a way that is not going to drive up inflation, that's going to bring the cost of living down. That's also why we're taking GST off fresh fruit and veggies.
Thank you. And Bill?
Number 28.
Sorry.
Oh, no, we have it.
Oh, sorry. 28? You will in a second. Hold on.
Could I have 18?
Oh, just H for hotel. Property investors often outbid first home buyers at house auctions. How would you encourage these investors to switch to more productive investments?
New Zealand First would initiate a depreciation of tax regime to incentivise capital investment in industry, to hasten improvement of technology and production, other tax and legislation to incentives away from housing to industry and R&D. Thank you.
Okay, Carl.
12, thank you.
W for whiskey. What is your policy on tackling New Zealand's obesity problem?
Thanks very much. It was really interesting. Last week, we had the opportunity to speak at Small Talks here in Whanganui, where the Life Education Trust was being fundraised for through the work of that event. And organisations like the Life Education Trust do great work in helping educate young New Zealanders around things like obesity and other challenges they face. And I think organisations like that should be supported to do their good work and help New Zealanders understand and young New Zealanders understand how to make good, healthy choices in life, from exercise to food and others that support them on their journey and support the idea of personal choice, which is a big National Party value.
And Steph.
Tacoma Waru, 18, please.
F for Freddie. The Future for Local Government reports say a significant fund is also needed to support climate change adaptation activities. How is your party going to respond to this issue?
That's a great question because it is a really significant issue. We've seen that this year firsthand in across on the East Coast, up in Auckland in the anniversary floods. We do need to make sure that we're putting more into adapting for climate change, and that's why we've created the Climate Emergency Response Fund, the Climate Adaptation Fund. We put in the recent budget in May $6 billion into a climate resilience fund, and we've also announced a national adaptation plan to support councils and communities with their adaptation journey as we respond to climate change. But we also, at the same time as focusing on adaptation, need to really focus on cutting our emissions. And with the policies that we have for the last 3 years, we've seen our emissions reducing. We need to stay on course.
Governments need to keep their fingers off these funds. They're really important.
And Marion, your number.
Right, number 16, be 16 again. Make it 16.
This is our last boxed question of the evening. Doesn't mean it's the last question, it's just the last one we're going to pull out of a box. R for Romeo. How effective do you consider the government's interventions and action on youth offending has been?
Perfect, thank you. Governments seem to think, or some parties seem to think, that the answer to offending is simple: lock them away. It's actually not going to answer, it's not helpful. For our youth, we actually need to get them into meaningful work, and especially outdoors. So we favour putting our young people into outward bound and jobs for nature. COVID has been unhelpful for our young people, and it's going to take a bit of time probably to get young people back on track. Some of the offending by young people often has adults behind it, so addressing it's actually not straightforward. But we think the police are doing a good job by keeping this, I think they do have programs, and keeping it a bit below the radar. Careful intervention is needed to get these young people back into society.
And thanks to our candidates for those good answers. We will be back after a short break where we'll be asking some hard-hitting questions. See you then. Welcome back. Now it's time for hard-hitting questions. All right. Now, we have our hard-hitting questions. Every an opportunity to answer. They will have 1 minute, and they cannot butt in or defer, because really there's not much point. So we'll start out with question number 1, starting with Marion and heading onwards. Our first question is, what is the most pressing issue in your electorate currently?
Climate change around the country too, but in Whanganui, climate change will impact everything. Our cost of living, because the cost of growing food and getting it to markets, the cost of infrastructure and rebuilds, it's going to impact cost of living. Our roads, our bridges. In 2015, we saw climate change impact on our CBD, on our homes. We're going to see coastal sea level rise. We're going to need managed retreat. So in all these ways, climate change is the biggie. And I'm asking people to focus on this election and make this the defining issue. Thank you.
And over to you, Steph.
The cost of living is certainly a big issue facing our electorate here in Whanganui. That is why we are working so hard to bring inflation down, because by bringing inflation down, we bring prices back down. We've done a lot of work to reform our grocery industry to encourage more competition, and we've seen that actually result in a dip in grocery prices last month for the first time. There's absolutely still more work to do. We've also removed the prescription fees. We're going to bring in free dental. We're going to remove GST of fresh fruit and vegetables, and we're going to build more houses, because we know that by building more houses, that increases the supply, which will bring the cost of housing down. We're also chipping in to help bring down power prices for families through our warmer Kiwi homes, through our winter energy payment, and that is why it's so important to unvote Labour this week.
Back to you, Carl.
2 weeks ago, I door knocked on a lady's home up in Aramaho. When she opened the door, she saw me and burst into tears. Now, I thought it was for the wrong reasons. But she said to me, I just don't know how I'm going to be able to pay my bills this month. I'm deferring my bills and I just don't know what I'm going to do. And she struggled to get the message across to me, but eventually she did. And she said, I don't know what they're doing with our money. I can't believe I can't afford to pay my bills each month and they're wasting it down there in Wellington. And that's a sentiment I've heard across this electorate. The cost of living is a key issue. You've got a choice between a government that thinks it can spend your money better than you can, that it knows how your household is affected by the cost of living and what they're going to do to fix it for you, or a national government that will give you money back in your pocket to make those choices in your household. So party vote national and let's get this economy back on track.
Okay, Bill.
While cost of living is one of the major concerns in our electorate, the lack of access to all health services. At my local practice, it's not uncommon to have to wait 6 to 8 weeks just to see a doctor, and often it will be a nurse practitioner who attends my needs rather than a doctor. There's a shortage of doctors, nurses and other health practitioners right across this electorate. Pharmac currently has a list of about 200 drugs waiting to be approved and funded, taking as long as 7 years to do so. New Zealand First would repurpose the current Pharmac model and make it more efficient and double its budget by 1.3 billion. We would repeal the Therapeutic Products Act, a bill we have opposed on more than one occasion. We would fund more training of medical health professionals with their student loans significantly reduced if bonded to the regions. We would properly fund ambulance services, helicopters, surf life saving, Plunket and Mike King's Gunboot Friday Rally charity for mental health.
And lastly, Sandra.
For many, especially the most vulnerable in our society, it is cost of living. The weekly supermarket bill rising considerably, issues such as affordable housing, including rental housing, cost of electricity and heating. When people are struggling financially and emotionally, their innocent companion animals are affected too. Speaking personally, I think an important local issue is the existence of 3 slaughterhouses here in Whanganui, where many hundreds of innocent animals are killed day in and day out, week in and week out, year in and year out. Slaughterhouses are bad news not only for the animals, but because of the mental health toll on the workers and their polluting activities, such as effluent going into the Whanganui River.
Okay, and our second hard-hitting question is, the central government increasingly communicates with citizens via email and text, therefore the non-computer literate visit libraries for assistance. Changes to central government practice and legislation impact on local communities, which councils are expected to deliver without funding. Do you believe that central government should form partnerships with councils to deliver central government services? If so, how should these partnerships be funded? And once again, I'll give it to Marion.
Partnerships, yes, and collaboration. It's really important because significant services are delivered to people at the local level. And the local rating base isn't sufficient to fund this increasing need with climate change as well. So what the Green Party would like to see is we need to rationalise the organisations that are delivering some of these services. And we support the amalgamation of water services, health and tertiary education into viable organisations for partnership. Also, the Regional Economic Development Fund is a good way to deliver funds as well. We do recognise that people who are not as online literate also struggle to connect with government, and this needs to be given attention through SeniorNet and other organisations help people to connect, and it's to be, that's the
Steph.
Absolutely, partnership is important. Earlier in the show, I mentioned our regional economic partnership fund, which is where we partner with councils and local communities to fund economic opportunities that are important to them. And that's a bottom-up partnership. We've also got, as I mentioned, the Climate Adaptation and Resilience Funds, which again to partner with local communities to help them adapt for climate change. We've had the Housing Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, which again is another opportunity for central government to partner with local government and local communities to speed up their ability to build houses locally. Here in Whanganui, we've received almost $2 million of funding through that fund, which is going to speed up the development of around 300 homes in Castlecliff. We've got numerous examples across the electorate of where government and central government and local government have partnered. The Port, the Sargent Art Gallery, the Stratford Cultural Hub, Harvard Cultural Hub, Stratford Aquatic Centre, and the list goes on.
And over to you, Carl.
Thank you. It's absolutely important for central government and local government to work together. National's committed to supporting and growing that partnership through a couple of ways. Firstly, we recognise the incentives between local government and central government aren't aligned, particularly around building homes. So for every house that local government consent above their 5-year average, whether it be here in Whanganui, in Stratford, in South Taranaki or around the rest of the country, we're going to provide $25,000 per consent above that 5-year average for local councils to spend on what they see fit to support their funding models and to align those incentives. Secondly, we're going to bring in city and regional deals where we think a lot longer term, 30-year plan, 10-year funding contract, where we sit down between local and central government, we work out what it is that's needed across key areas of infrastructure, social services, etc. Agree what that is, contract it and fund it for 10 years and take that out of the political cycle so that we align those intentions between local and central government and get things done.
And Bill.
Thank you. Because central government communicates mostly with citizens by text or email, it should partner with local bodies to provide those services to people who, through being computer illiterate, are increasingly marginalised by technology. And these services should be supplied at libraries or other such facilities. Because council budgets are already stretched, this should be funded by central government as a central government and local body partnership, perhaps by the Ministry of Local Government or Ministry of Social Development. Thank you.
Okay, and lastly, Sandra.
Based on our party's values of compassion, equality, sustainability, and just transition, we could support partnerships that align with these values. We would advocate funds be allocated based on the principles of just transition away from industries that exploit innocent animals. Central government funding to support local councils should prioritise sustainability, equality, and, from our point of view, improving animals' lives. One way of improving their lives is not to take their lives away from them. Their lives are as precious to them as ours are to us.
Okay, and now we head to the time of the show, probably the most interesting time, where people our candidates get to submit the members' bill that they would put in the biscuit tin were they elected to become your MP. So this is something that any MP can do, and there is a time in the sort of the political cycle when these bills are randomly selected out of a hat. So it can be anything you like. So Sandra, we'll start off with your end. You have 2 minutes, by the way. So
My private member's bill would be to get moving a transition nationwide out of animal agriculture into healthier, more sustainable, more compassionate, plant-based farming.
okay, short and sweet. Over to you, Bill.
Yeah, my private member's bill would be to press for civics to be a mandatory subject taught to better prepare our youth for life after school. Components should be how the financial, banking and tax system works, how to budget to shop for basic needs, to prepare basic healthy meals and to care for one's home, how to access the health system and maintain a healthy lifestyle, how to drive safely and possibly even lessons to the point of obtaining a driver's license, and very importantly, how our voting system works, particularly with regards to MMP, given that even after 30 years, most New Zealanders still don't really understand it and still tend to vote first past the post. I envisage that these civics classes would be taught through high school years. Thank you.
And do you believe that it's in the ballot might be a handy part of that curriculum?
Watching the show might be in that curriculum.
Hopefully. Oh, well, over to you, Carl.
Thanks very much. So my private member's bill comes from having spoken to a number of community housing providers, particularly around the access and availability of using Māori land for borrowing to build housing, particularly in Māori trusts and within Māori communities. And there's some regulations and challenges that stop that being practical and able to be done, as well as building houses and funding just the house as opposed to borrowing against the land on those. So while within the National Party, all private members' bills have to go through caucus, and I can't comment on obviously what caucus would or wouldn't allow, if I had the opportunity, it would be sitting down with those community-based organisations like Waiora Trust up in Aramaho, and ensuring that we can address those regulations with practical changes in legislation, with practical changes so that we can build those affordable and social houses on Māori land, obviously for those owners, not for government or for sale or the like, so that we can get more housing to those communities.
And now over to Steph.
I have been incredibly lucky in that in my first term as a Member of Parliament, I had my private member's bill drawn from the ballot. So that was the Information for Incoming Passengers Amendment Bill, which is now passed into law as an act and was supported right across the House by all parties in Parliament. So that adds another layer of protection to our biosecurity arrangements here in New Zealand to basically make sure that every person coming into New Zealand helps us to protect our unique biodiversity and help us conserve our land. I then, after that bill passed, explored extending paid parental leave to partners. The government has now taken that on as or we are now campaigning on that rather as the Labour Party, that partners would get an additional 4 weeks rather paid parental leave if we get back into government. So one of the next things that I'm looking at is from a woman who was an employee, and she received an award in the employment court where she was deemed to be an employee, whereas her employer had classed her as a casual worker, when in fact she was required to regularly turn up to work every single week and work regular rostered hours. The employee went to court and an award was made in her favour, and the employer walked out of court and said, haha, I'm just going to voluntarily liquidate so I don't have to pay the employee that award. So I would draft a private member's bill if I had the opportunity to prevent voluntary liquidation where the employment court has made an award against an employer.
And lastly with you, Marion.
Cannabis reform, we need to get this back on the agenda. After the referendum, which was really interesting back in 2020, whether the time is right, but I'd try it. The current settings, they criminalise sometimes many victims and deny support for people who could benefit therapeutically from being able to take cannabis. They also lock away economic advantages for our area for growing hemp. It's a very useful product, plus the medicinal uses that could be possible. It is a drug, and we have already, I know, quite a few that are misused in our community, but cannabis, I understand, for the most part, doesn't turn people into, there's not the same level of violence as a result of its use. Certainly, driving under the influence is not good. But what we need to do is treat cannabis as with other drugs, alcohol, methamphetamines and others. It's a health issue, and people need help so that they're not misusing it. So as proposed in the referendum, we'd regulate for availability and quality. Probably we need to have another good look at what was put forward in the referendum. It may need tweaking. I think that a lot of the anxiety around it and the reason why a lot of people voted against it was because there were still some concerns about misuse. So possibly we need to tweak the settings. But cannabis reform is the private member's bill that I would work on.
Plenty to look forward to. Well, I'll invite the candidates to give their closing statements. They'll have a minute to do so, and let's start off from Marion this time.
The climate change. We need to get our emissions down. Per capita, New Zealand is actually a high emitting country. And while people often point to, well, India and China, if we do it, we can encourage those countries to do their bit as well. But we certainly need to do our bit. We've had incredibly the advantages of being able to develop our economy using fossil fuels. So now's the time to get those emissions down. This is probably our last chance to elect a government that will mobilise us to play our part in addressing climate change. So I'm asking for your party vote this election. With more Green MPs in Parliament, we will go further and faster to address climate change. So please, party vote Green in this election.
Steph.
There's a lot at stake this election, and I think about my 5-year-old daughter Scarlett and my 17-month-old son Flynn. And I don't want my daughter Scarlett growing up in a world where she experienced the hurt and humiliation I did at finding out that my male colleague with the same qualifications doing the exact same job gets paid $6,000 more a year than me. I don't want my kids growing up and wondering if they will ever be able to afford to get out, move out of home, or worried about the next severe weather event or the extreme heat of summer because we haven't addressed climate change. So this election, I'm in it for Scarlett and Flynn and for every single kid whose futures we determine with the decisions that we make right now. We are working incredibly hard to address the cost of living. We've turned a corner economically. Inflation is coming down. Food prices are coming down. We need to stay the course. Now's not the time to chuck the car in reverse and park issues like climate change. That's why this election we need to party vote Labour and we need to vote Steph Lewis.
Carl, your closing statement.
As I've spoken to thousands of people on the doorsteps across this electorate, it's really clear to me that everyone is facing real challenges this year. Cost of living, access to health, quality education, challenges with law and order, and the ability to get a house. This election, you have a choice to elect here in Whanganui an active, visible and engaged local member of Parliament in Carl Bates, and elect a government that will get New Zealand back on track by fixing the economy, getting inflation under control, ensuring high-earning jobs, and the health and education services we all deserve. So this year, between the 2nd of October and the 14th, we're asking you to make a plan to get out and party vote national and vote Carl Bates for Whanganui. If you already had one, we wouldn't be here.
All right, and now Bill, your closing statement.
Yeah, I settled here in 2016 after 30 odd years in Australia. So I'm a relative newcomer here. My partner and I own a house in Gonville and I work at Bunnings. I have a passion for Whanganui to be a prosperous, attractive to industry and productive, giving the best opportunity for employment. I want Whanganui to be a safe place for people to raise their families and to grow into old age comfortably. For me, New Zealand First is the party that can bring much needed change for the better, bring our country back from the brink of becoming a third world country, and it will go that way if we don't vote carefully. I'm put in mind of that old Ford ad. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. New Zealand First is the one party that has consistently stood for all New Zealanders. It's in our name. Please party vote for New Zealand First.
And that leaves us with Sandra.
I also believe that climate change is the defining issue of our times. And it's not only people who are suffering through the changes in climate, through the heat waves, the floods, the tornadoes, the hurricanes, and so on. It's our wildlife. About 3 billion animals were affected in the Australian fires, for example. So we stand for compassion, environmental sustainability, and just transition, with a particular focus on animals and wildlife. So I ask you to give this fledgling party a bit of a boost and give us your party vote in October. Thank you.
Well, thank you for all the candidates for showing up here, well, almost all of them, And thank you for the viewers both at home and our wonderful audience, and indeed you tuning in after we've recorded this before the election. I'd like to hand over to Sam.
Yes, the very unusual moment where I step in not dressed up in presenting clothes, instead what I do behind the scenes. We have some unfortunate news for our next show, and shoot me if I get this wrong, because I probably will. Te Tai Hararuru. No, Harouru. See, I'm glad I'm up here, because at least in Wellington, they don't teach you how to pronounce these names properly. And it's the only electorate in New Zealand I struggle to sit there and actually pronounce properly. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but we do know it's, was it about the former name being Western Māori pre-MMP days. So we've received communication tonight that was it two of the candidates confirmed, one of them has had to be asked to make the decision between another meet the candidates in Tauranui or here, and with the fact that we weren't notified about this until tonight. Rule number one, if you're a candidate and you're out there campaigning and you do come across where you get invited to meet candidates clash, just say, hey, I'm at such and such, rather than, because we don't like having to do it. So we're going to be parking this show, and we'll be giving the candidates the opportunity to have it at a future date, because we believe that this is a very vital electorate that needs it, considering it has no incumbent MP, because incumbent MP is going list only at this election. So we will be parking that show. Those who have brought tickets on Eventbrite to watch it for free, we will send you an email after the show that will update you with what's happening and with a rescheduled date, and it will be a remote only show. And we'll be working with the candidates to work on a suitable date that works on there, so the voters will have their candidates standing in front of it. So that's my quick message, but I hand back the show back over to you, considering it's your show for this one. And, well, you know, thanks for letting me do the message on screen.
Oh, well, thanks for everyone's understanding, and I hope that you'll tune in tomorrow. We are in New Plymouth. And signing off from here in Whanganui. Ta-ta.